Welcome to Aviation Stories Uncovered. In this episode, the Boeing 747, the original jumbo jet that doubled the size of air travel, opened international flight to ordinary passengers and stayed in production for more than half a century. On February 9, 1969, an aircraft so large that Boeing had to construct the biggest building, by volume, in the entire world just to assemble it, took to the skies for the first time above Washington state. The Boeing 747 didn't just introduce a new airplane. It introduced an entirely new category of air travel, the wide-body jumbo jet, and in doing so, made international air travel accessible to an entirely new generation of ordinary travelers who had never before been able to afford or even imagine a transoceanic flight. When it first entered airline service in 1970, its sheer size was so far beyond anything passengers had previously experienced that early advertising campaigns focused almost entirely on simply showing off the cabin's unprecedented width and the novelty of an onboard upper deck lounge, rather than promoting speed or destinations the way earlier jet advertising typically had. The 747 is instantly recognizable by its distinctive upper deck hump, which houses additional seating, or, in some configurations, a lounge, and which originated partly from an early design consideration that the aircraft might eventually need to be converted into a cargo hauler with a hinged nose door, requiring the cockpit to be relocated up and out of the way. Depending on configuration, it can carry anywhere from around 366 to over 660 passengers, powered by 4 engines, and capable of ranges reaching roughly 8,000 miles in its later variants, cruising at speeds around 570 miles per hour. Across all its variants, from the original 747-100 through the final 747-8, over 1,570 were built before Boeing ended production in 2023, capping more than half a century of continuous manufacture, one of the longest production runs of any commercial aircraft in history. At its peak production rate, Boeing's Everett factory could roll a new 747 off the line roughly every few days, and the aircraft's sheer physical scale required airports around the world to adopt entirely new categories of ground support equipment, larger jet bridges, bigger cargo loaders, and wider taxiway markings, simply to accommodate a passenger jet unlike anything that had come before it. Developing the 747 was an almost unimaginably risky bet for Boeing. Encouraged in large part by Pan American World Airways founder Juan Trippe, who wanted a much larger aircraft to meet booming demand for international travel, Boeing committed to building not just the aircraft itself, but an entirely new manufacturing facility in Everett, Washington, constructed simultaneously alongside the plane's actual engineering design, an enormous, high-stakes gamble often referred to at the time as Incredible Everett. The financial strain very nearly bankrupted the company, and Boeing's stock price and workforce both suffered significant, painful cuts before the aircraft finally proved commercially successful, a gamble that, in hindsight, paid off spectacularly but came dangerously close to disaster. Since 1990, a highly customized, specially equipped version of the Boeing 747, designated the VC-25 and universally known by its radio call sign Air Force One whenever the President of the United States is aboard, has served as the primary aircraft for presidential travel, equipped with advanced communications equipment, defensive countermeasures, and even the capability for in-flight refueling, transforming a commercial airliner design into arguably the most recognizable and secure aircraft flown by any single individual in the entire world. Beyond commercial and presidential service, a specially modified 747 known as the shuttle carrier aircraft served NASA for decades, carrying space shuttle orbiters piggyback across the country between landing sites and the launch facility at Kennedy Space Center, an almost surreal sight of one of history's largest airliners ferrying one of history's most advanced spacecraft across the sky, and a vivid symbol of how thoroughly the 747's airframe had become woven into the broader story of American aerospace achievement. In one of the aircraft's more unusual scientific roles, NASA and the German Aerospace Center jointly operated a heavily modified 747 SP, a shortened, longer-range variant of the jumbo jet, fitted with a massive infrared telescope mounted in its rear fuselage behind a specially engineered sliding door that opened mid-flight at altitudes above 40,000 feet, well above most of the water vapor that otherwise blocks infrared astronomy from the ground. Named SOFIA for the Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy, the aircraft flew regular overnight research missions for nearly a decade, allowing astronomers to observe distant stars, planets, and galaxies in ways ground-based telescopes simply couldn't match. A genuinely unexpected second career for an airframe originally designed purely to carry passengers. Even as passenger airlines gradually shifted toward more fuel-efficient twin-engine wide-body jets in the 21st century, the 747's cargo-carrying variants remained in high demand for a simple reason rooted in its original design. The aircraft's cockpit, raised up and out of the way in that distinctive hump, left the entire nose free to swing open on a hinge, allowing oversized cargo, entire industrial machines, helicopters, even other aircraft fuselage sections, to be driven or rolled directly into the front of the jet in ways no competing freighter design could easily match. That single design choice, made decades earlier for reasons that had little to do with cargo at all, kept the 747 production line building freighter versions for years after the last passenger order had been delivered. A quiet final chapter for an aircraft whose working life ultimately outlasted almost every prediction made about it. The 747 was built to solve a looming capacity problem. By the mid-1960s, air travel demand was growing so quickly that airports and airways risked becoming hopelessly congested with an ever-increasing number of smaller aircraft. Boeing's solution was to build dramatically bigger, allowing far more passengers to fly on each individual flight and dramatically lowering the cost per seat, which in turn made international travel affordable to a much broader segment of the population than ever before. In doing so, the 747 didn't simply meet existing demand for larger aircraft. It fundamentally reshaped global tourism, business travel, and cultural exchange, turning what had once been a rare, expensive luxury into something within reach of millions of ordinary families for the very first time.